43%. That's the number that stopped me cold. 43% of small and medium manufacturing businesses in the United States turn down new orders every single month because they simply do not have the labor to fulfill them. They have the customers, they have the demand, they have the raw materials. What they don't have is someone to stand at a machine and load parts into a CNC mill for 8 hours a day. And you might be thinking, well, just buy a robot. We live in the future, right? Here's the problem. Buying an industrial robot costs anywhere from $100,000 to $250,000 upfront. If you run a small metal shop making $2 million a year in revenue, you do not have $250,000 sitting in a checking account waiting to be spent on a metal arm that you don't even know how to program. But what if you didn't have to buy it? What if you could rent an employee made of steel who works 24 hours a day, never takes a bathroom break, never asks for a raise, and costs exactly $15 an hour? My name is George, and today we are looking at a business model that is quietly reshaping the industrial landscape. It's called Robotics-as-a-Service, or RaaS, and it is arguably the most lucrative and glamorous B2B service you can build right now. Let's get into it. To understand why this is such a massive opportunity, you have to understand how factories actually work. When we think of manufacturing, we think of Tesla gigafactories or Amazon fulfillment centers with thousands of synchronized robots moving in perfect harmony. But that is not reality. The reality is that 98% of manufacturing in the United States is done by small and medium-sized enterprises. We're talking about the guy who owns a warehouse in Ohio, has 15 employees, and makes the little plastic caps that go on the end of aluminum fences. That guy is the backbone of the economy, and he is in crisis. According to data compiled from industry reports published in 2025 and 2026, the manufacturing sector is facing a massive labor shortage. The older generation of machinists is retiring, and younger people simply do not want to stand in a loud, hot factory moving parts from point A to point B. The work is dull, dirty, and dangerous. So the factory owner is stuck. He can't find humans to do the work. And when he looks at automation, a traditional robotics integrator comes to his shop and hands him a quote for $180,000. Not only is that a massive capital expenditure, or CapEx, but it comes with huge risk. What if the robot breaks? What if it's too complicated to use? Who's going to fix it when it goes down on a Tuesday afternoon? This is where Robotics-as-a-Service steps in. Instead of selling a robot, a RaaS company sells an outcome. They walk into that factory in Ohio and say, I'm going to put a robot right here. It will pack 400 boxes an hour. I will install it. I will program it. I will maintain it. And you will not pay me a single dollar for the machine. You will only pay me $15 for every hour it works. The factory owner doesn't have to go to the bank for a loan. He doesn't have to hire a robotics engineer. He just signs a service agreement and his labor problem is solved. Let's do the simple math. If you charge a factory $15 an hour for a robot that runs 2 shifts a day, 16 hours a day, 5 days a week, that's 80 hours a week. At $15 an hour, that's $200 a week in recurring revenue per robot. That is $4,800 a month from one machine. Now, a standard collaborative robot arm like a Universal Robots UR10 might cost you $40,000 to buy used or off the shelf. If you are generating $4,800 a month in recurring revenue, that machine pays for itself in just over 8 months. Every month after that is almost pure gross margin, minus some software hosting and occasional maintenance. If you deploy 10 robots across 3 or 4 local factories, you're generating $48,000 a month in predictable recurring cash flow. No warehouse, no massive payroll, just you, your deployment skills, and a fleet of machines quietly printing money while you sleep. And here's the thing, the factories love it. On Reddit's r small business and r sweaty startup forums, you'll find real factory owners talking about this exact shift. One owner of a custom packaging facility posted about how he was quoted over $300,000 to automate his end-of-line palletizing. He didn't have the budget. Then a RaaS startup approached him. They offered to install the exact same system for a flat fee of $4,500 a month. He took the deal immediately. His factory output increased by 20%, his human workers were moved to higher value tasks, and the RaaS provider locked in a multi-year contract. That is the power of turning CapEx into OpEx. Operational expenditure is a monthly bill, like the electric bill. It doesn't require board approval, it doesn't require a bank loan, it just slides into the existing operating budget. But let me be honest with you for a moment. If it's so lucrative, why isn't everyone doing it? Why isn't every tech bro in Silicon Valley pivoting to rent out robot arms in the Midwest? Because it's hard, physical, dirty work. It's boring. And that is exactly where your advantage lies. The business that's the most physically uncomfortable to do is usually the least competitive. Nobody dreams about spending their Tuesday calibrating a suction gripper in a dusty metal stamping plant. That's exactly why it pays. The boring factor is the advantage. Nobody's competing with you because nobody thinks it's exciting enough to try. Building a RaaS business means you have to be the integrator. You have to understand the hardware. But more importantly, you have to understand the customer's problem. You don't sell a robot arm. You sell the fact that boxes get packed. You don't sell a computer vision system. You sell the fact that defective parts get sorted. Think about it like you're a kid. It's the difference between selling a lawnmower and selling a perfectly cut lawn. If you try to sell a homeowner a $5,000 commercial lawnmower, they will say no. But if you tell them you'll guarantee their grass is perfectly cut every single week for $100, they sign the contract. You just happen to use the $5,000 mower to do it. And here's something almost nobody tells you. You don't even have to build the robots yourself. In fact, you absolutely shouldn't. There's a huge misconception that to start a robotics company, you need a PhD from MIT and millions in venture capital to design a new piece of hardware from scratch. That is a guaranteed way to go bankrupt. The hardware already exists. Companies like Universal Robots, Fanuc, and KUKA have spent billions of dollars perfecting the hardware. Your job is not to reinvent the wheel. Your job is to buy the wheel, put a tire on it, and rent it to someone who needs to go somewhere. Walker Deibel points this out brilliantly in his book, Buy Then Build. The greatest risk in business is trying to create something entirely new that the market might not want. The lowest risk is taking existing proven assets and deploying them into existing proven demand. You buy off-the-shelf hardware. You use off-the-shelf software from platforms like Exwhite or Formic, which actually provide the back-end infrastructure to manage RaaS fleets. You package it together and you become the service provider. You are essentially an equipment leasing company mixed with an IT managed services provider. Let's look at the actual operations. How do you scale this? The biggest hurdle for a RaaS entrepreneur is the initial capital. If the robots cost $40,000 and you need to buy 10 of them, you need $400,000. Most people don't have that. But remember, these are revenue generating assets. Once you have a signed contract from a factory owner agreeing to pay you $4,800 a month for the next 3 years, that contract is an asset. You can take that contract to an equipment financing company and they will lend you the money to buy the robot. You use the bank's money to buy the machine, you use the factory's monthly payment to pay the bank, and you pocket the spread. It sounds almost illegal. It's not. It's just equipment financing arbitrage. And it has been the backbone of the industrial economy for a century. And that's the uncomfortable truth behind this entire model. The real innovation isn't technical, it's financial. You are solving a financial bottleneck for the factory owner. They need automation, but can't afford the upfront cost. You absorb the upfront cost using specialized financing. You charge a premium for the convenience. Let's talk about maintenance, because that's the part that terrifies most people. What happens when the robot breaks? According to data from major manufacturers, the mean time between failures for modern industrial robots is often over 50,000 hours. That's over 5 years of continuous 24/7 operation. These machines are built like tanks. When they do break, it's rarely the core mechanics. It's usually a sensor that got dirty, a cable that got pinched, or a suction cup that wore out. Your maintenance cost is incredibly low. You might spend $200 a year replacing worn-out grippers on a machine that generated $50,000 in revenue. But the perceived value of your maintenance is incredibly high, because when that robot stops, the factory stops. When the factory owner calls you at 10 a.m. on a Thursday and you remote into the system, diagnose the sensor issue, and have it running again in 20 minutes, to him, you are a magician. You just saved his production quota. That is why he happily pays the monthly invoice. Now we enter the second half of this equation, where the model gets even more interesting and less obvious. What happens when a factory needs to scale down? Manufacturing is seasonal. A packaging company might need 3 robots during the holiday rush, but only 1 during the summer. Under the old CapEx model, if they bought 3 robots, 2 of them would sit idle gathering dust for 6 months, wasting money. Under the RaaS model, they just return the 2 robots to you. You then take those same 2 robots and deploy them to an agricultural sorting facility that is just hitting its peak harvest season. You maximize the utilization of the asset. You keep the robots working, and you keep getting paid. This is the exact same model that made the equipment rental industry a $50 billion juggernaut. Companies like United Rentals don't build bulldozers. They buy bulldozers and rent them out. The only difference is that a bulldozer requires a human operator. Your robots operate themselves. You literally have employees that don't complain, don't ask for vacations, and produce liquid gold. And if this already made sense to you, wait until you see the compounding effect. Here's the trick. YouTube gurus never explain about B2B services. The cost to acquire your first customer is extremely high. You might spend 6 months knocking on factory doors and doing free demos and convincing a skeptical owner to let you install 1 robot for a 30-day trial. But once you are in, once that first robot runs flawlessly for a month, That same factory owner will look at his spreadsheet, see the labor savings, and ask you to install 3 more. Your cost to acquire the next 3 contracts is practically zero. Then he tells his buddy who owns a machine shop across town, and suddenly you aren't cold calling anymore. You have a reputation as the automation guy. Let's look at the nuances of deployment, because this is where a lot of beginners fail. They think you can just drop a robot in the middle of a room, plug it into a standard wall outlet, and tell it to start working. That is not how industrial automation works. Before a robot ever touches a factory floor, you have to do something called a site survey. You walk through the facility and map out the exact workflow. Where do the raw materials arrive? How heavy are they? What is the cycle time of the CNC machine? You have to measure everything. Then comes the safety protocol. Industrial robots are incredibly powerful pieces of equipment. If a standard industrial arm is moving at full speed and hits a human worker, it will cause serious injury. This is why you see those giant yellow safety cages around robots in car factories. But as a RaaS provider, your secret weapon is the collaborative robot, or cobot. Cobots are specifically designed to work safely alongside humans without cages. They have built-in sensors that detect resistance. If a cobot bumps into an operator's shoulder, it instantly stops. This changes the entire economics of installation. You don't need to build a $10,000 safety enclosure. You just bolt the cobot to a rolling cart, roll it up to the machine, and plug it in. This mobility is crucial for the RaaS business model. If you hardwire a robot into the concrete floor, you can't move it when the contract ends. By using mobile, collaborative robots, your asset remains perfectly liquid. You can literally roll it out the back door, load it into a van, and drive it to your next customer. Let's do the simple math on the tax advantages, because this is where the real wealth is built in B2B leasing. When you buy a piece of equipment to rent out, you're buying a depreciating asset. Under Section 179 of the IRS tax code, you can often deduct the entire purchase price of that equipment in the first year. So, let's say you secure financing to buy 5 robots for $200,000. You deploy them and they start generating monthly cash flow. Come tax season, you can potentially write off that entire $200,000 against your business income, massively reducing your tax liability. You're using borrowed money to buy an asset that pays for itself while simultaneously lowering your taxes. This is the exact strategy that billionaires use in commercial real estate. You're just applying it to industrial machinery. But it's not all sunshine and tax write-offs. You have to understand the liability. What happens if the robot drops apart and breaks a $50,000 machine tool? Who pays for that? This is where your service contract is your shield. Your contract clearly states that you are responsible for the uptime of the robot, but you are not liable for consequential damages to the factory's equipment. You carry a robust commercial general liability insurance policy, which costs a few $100s a month. You build the cost of that insurance directly into the $15 an hour you charge the factory. The factory pays your insurance premium without even realizing it. And this brings up a critical point about selecting your niche. Not all factory tasks are created equal. The biggest mistake a new RaaS provider makes is trying to automate complex, delicate assembly work. A Reddit user on RRobotics shared a nightmare story about trying to automate the assembly of tiny electronic circuit boards as a service. The parts were too small, the variances were too high, and the robot kept failing. He spent 3 months trying to get it right, lost the contract, and lost his shirt. The smart money in robotics-as-a-service is in what the industry calls pick and place. You look for the most repetitive, mindless tasks in the building. Palletizing is the golden goose. Palletizing is literally just picking up a cardboard box off a conveyor belt and putting it onto a wooden pallet, over and over again, thousands of times a day. It requires zero intelligence, but it destroys human backs. Factory workers hate it. Factory owners hate paying workers comp claims for it. When you walk into a facility and offer to automate their palletizing for a flat monthly fee, it is the easiest sale in the world. The robot never gets a hernia. The boxes are stacked perfectly every time. You have solved a massive headache for the owner, and you have secured a predictable, low-maintenance, recurring revenue stream. Another massive niche right now is welding. There's a critical shortage of skilled welders in the United States. The average age of a master welder is approaching 60. When they retire, there's nobody to replace them. Companies are desperate for welding automation. A standard welding cobot can be taught to lay perfect beads of weld all day long. You charge a premium for this, maybe $30 or $40 an hour instead of $15, because welding is a high-value skill. You buy the robotic welding cell, you lease it to the fabrication shop, and you just created a cash printing machine. But wait, we have to talk about software. Because the hardware is only half the battle. How do you actually monitor a fleet of 15 robots scattered across 4 different cities? You can't drive to every factory every day to check if the machines are running. This is where the RaaS platform ecosystem comes in. Companies have emerged specifically to support RaaS operators like you. You install a small edge computing device next to each robot. That device connects to the cloud and streams real-time telemetry data to a centralized dashboard on your laptop. You can sit in a coffee shop and watch the exact performance of every single machine in your fleet. You see the cycle times, you see the error rates. If a robot in a factory 50 miles away experiences a sudden spike in motor temperature, your dashboard alerts you before the motor actually fails. You can call the factory owner and say, "Hey, I'm noticing some thermal issues on Unit 4. I'm going to send a technician out during your lunch shift tomorrow to swap the part so you don't lose any production time." That level of proactive service is what locks in multi-year contracts. The factory owner realizes that you aren't just renting him equipment, you are actively optimizing his business. And as your fleet grows, the data you collect becomes your secondary moat. Let's do the simple math on optimization. If you have a robot packing boxes, and it takes exactly 10 seconds to pack one box, over an 8-hour shift, that's 2,280 boxes. But because you have software monitoring the movements, you analyze the telemetry data and realize the robotic arm is swinging 15 degrees wider than it needs to. You push a software update over the cloud that tightens the movement path. The cycle time drops from 10 seconds to 9.5 seconds. That half-second improvement means the robot now packs 3,031 boxes in an 8-hour shift. You just gave the factory owner a 5% increase in throughput without installing any new hardware. It cost you nothing but a few keystrokes. When it comes time to renew that $4,800 a month contract, the factory owner isn't going to shop around. The switching cost is too high. If he fires you, he doesn't just lose a machine, he loses the optimized workflow you built. He loses the peace of mind. He signs the renewal without hesitation. This brings up another massive advantage of the RaaS model: geographic density. When you start this business, you don't try to sell across the entire country. You don't even try to sell across the state. You pick a 50-mile radius around your house. Why? Because density equals profitability. If you have 10 robots in 10 different factories that are all within a 30-minute drive of each other, your maintenance routes are incredibly efficient. If 2 machines throw an error code on the same day, you can service both of them in a single afternoon. If you spread your machines out over a 300-mile radius, your travel time will eat your margins alive. You dominate your local industrial park. You become the go-to automation guy for a specific zip code. You let the massive venture-backed companies fight over the giant automotive plants. You focus quietly on the small, forgotten family-owned businesses that the big guys ignore. These small businesses are everywhere. There are over 250,000 small manufacturing firms in the United States alone. They are in unmarked metal buildings off the side of the highway. They make components for aerospace, they mold plastics, they cut sheet metal, they blend chemicals. Every single one of them is struggling to hire reliable labor. Every single one of them is a potential customer for a RaaS provider. And as you build relationships with these owners, you start to see other opportunities. Once you are inside a facility providing a robotics service, you gain intimate knowledge of their entire operation. You notice that they have a forklift running 24/7. You notice they have massive energy bills. You notice they struggle with inventory management. Because they already trust you, and you already proved you can save them money with a monthly service model, you can start upselling. You can offer automated guided vehicles, AGVs, to move pallets around the warehouse. You can offer automated inventory tracking systems. You transition from being a guy who rents out a robot arm to being their entire automation department, billed as a predictable monthly service. This is how you build a business that is completely insulated from economic downturns. During a recession, a factory owner will freeze all CapEx spending. He won't buy a new $200,000 machine, but he still needs to fulfill his orders. In fact, during a recession, his margins are squeezed even tighter, which means he is even more desperate to reduce his labor costs. He might not buy a robot, but he will absolutely rent one from you for $15 an hour if it replaces a $25 an hour human worker. Robotics-as-a-Service is counter-cyclical. When the economy tightens, the demand for cost-saving operational expenditures actually goes up. This brings me to a story about 2 different guys who saw the same opportunity but took completely different paths. Let's call one Daniel and the other Alex. Daniel saw the labor shortage in manufacturing and decided he was going to build a robotics company. He spent 2 years and $200,000 of investor money trying to engineer a brand new proprietary robotic arm that was 5% faster than anything else on the market. He focused entirely on the hardware. When he finally brought it to market, no factory wanted to buy it because he was an unproven startup asking for $120,000 up front. Daniel ran out of cash and shut down the company. Alex took a different route. Alex didn't know how to build a robot, but he knew how to talk to factory owners. He found a local metal stamping plant that couldn't find workers to load raw steel into the presses. Alex bought a standard, used robotic arm for $25,000. He spent 2 weeks learning how to program the basic movements using free tutorials provided by the manufacturer. He went to the factory owner and said, "I will load your presses for $4,000 a month. If it doesn't work, I'll take the machine back." The owner agreed. It worked perfectly. A year later, Alex had 15 robots deployed across 4 different factories. He wasn't an inventor. He was a service provider. He built a system that generated $60,000 a month in recurring revenue, while Daniel went bankrupt trying to be a genius. None of this is brilliant. All of it is consistent. The money isn't hiding in the exciting ideas. It never was. It's hiding in the boring ones that nobody else wants to do. It's hiding in the dusty corners of a packaging plant in Ohio, waiting for someone willing to get their hands slightly dirty to solve a real, painful problem. When I first started studying business, I was also looking for the genius idea. I thought you had to invent the next iPhone or the next ChatGPT to build real wealth. But the deeper I looked into the data, the more I realized that the highest survival rates and the most predictable cash flows belong to people who simply take existing technology and wrap a frictionless service model around it. Ask yourself first whether a business pays you once or pays you every month. Selling a robot pays you once. Operating a robot as a service pays you every single month, long after the asset is paid off. The question isn't whether robotics as a service is the future of manufacturing. The data from Grandview Research and every major industry analyst says it is. The global RaaS market is expected to grow massively over the next 5 years. The question is, are you going to be the one who deploys the robots or the one competing against them? Hit that like button. It helps a lot. Subscribe if you want us to keep talking about real money and business strategies. Tell me in the comments what kind of factory you would target first if you started a RaaS business today. I'm George, and I'll see you in the next video.